Welcome to the Rate Good Kyrk Dodds podcast with Kyrk Dodds and Taryn Murray.
Hello.
So, Kyrk, how much money do you have?
None.
Nice.
Yes. None.
It's best that people think you have none,
Yeah.
so they won't come a
Stop
knocking.
asking for it.
Yeah, get out of here. I don't got any.
Yeah, money's a touchy subject for sure.
It is. I mean, it's important.
Yeah.
Definitely need some of it.
Necessary, yeah.
Yeah. Things get stressful when you run out of it.
Yeah.
But you gotta just keep on going.
Yeah, well, what can you do, yeah.
Yeah.
There's different ways to live with money. There's ways of living without money as well.
Yeah, there is. I think I've been wanting as a goal to just work towards a place where I no longer need to be spending so much just of money to survive.
Yeah.
In a place where I could hunt and grow food and do other things like that, and just try to not have to dip my toes into that as much as I can manage.
Yeah.
As opposed to perhaps having a dream of spending even more and more luxurious things that I can't as of yet now afford.
That's a good point. I mean, like, what do you spend money on now that you couldn't do on your own, you know? Like, if you could feed yourself and you had a water supply and you already had your place built where you're living, what would you need to spend money on?
Well, it starts to just become a, person-to-person kind of question.
Yeah.
I think I'd love to do things like travel.
Yeah.
To the degree I could. I'd love to read a lot of books, and I'd love to, have a cool mountain bike and take yoga classes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I mean, also having a family. I'd love to have a family someday. That requires money, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then everywhere you can make more breathing room for yourself, I mean, that just sounds ideal to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really comes down to, like, if you can't barter, if you don't have anything to offer, then you'd have to pay with money. Because even if you knew someone that made mountain bikes and you made guitars, say, you could just trade a guitar for a mountain bike, you know?
If you wanted a guitar.
If you wanted a guitar. So that's
Yeah.
where money comes in handy, right? Because you can just sell guitars. People want guitars, get that money, and then go get a mountain bike.
Yeah.
It's totally useful for sure. But it also depends on how big the community that you're in. Because, like, if you're saying stuff like you'd rather not spend as much money as possible, well, then if you were surrounded by like-minded people that were willing to barter and stuff like that and stockpile mountain bikes, or
Yeah. Stockpile anything.
Yeah, make a trip into town every once in a while to sell some shit, you know.
Yeah.
You could get pretty damn close to not having to trade a dollar.
And eventually, it would turn into its own little town with its own little philosophy and movement, and it would grow and then eventually become the size of a nation, and then a few hundred years go by and things are really great for a while, and then eventually everyone just loses the plot at some point, and it all falls back to shit, and everyone's like, what the fuck is with this shitty society?
Yeah.
And then some new people have to come up with some new wave going at her, or it just doesn't do any of that.
Yeah. I guess what worries me is, like, if you come along and you think there's going to be a new way that's going to be better, and it turns out worse than the old way.
I wonder if there's just, like, seasons to, like, even culture. Like, you get some real bullshit every once in a while, like North Korea, and it's always happening somewhere at some point.
Yeah.
Like, maybe skip ahead 1,000 years, and this part of the world is just an absolute fucking dictatorship, tyranny, brainwashed 100%. And North Korea is just, people are buying sports cars and eating tasty burgers and doing whatever the fuck they want because it's free.
Yeah.
I don't know why sports cars and tasty burgers were what came to my head.
I guess that's what we're known for.
Yeah. That's good around here. Yeah, you said something really cool before the podcast. That was I don't know who you said it, but that money was at one point just a part of our society and a part of us, but now it's become everything to some people.
It is the culture now.
Yeah, it is the culture.
So what we're known by is that the marketing and the sales and the advertising. It should be a tool, like, because we know it's necessary. Money's necessary in the trade and to have shops, but they're allowed to go too far with it, it seems. And then ultimately, once someone has that much money, they can advertise all day. You're in their complete control of what you see and what you hear. And we like to think, oh, well, advertising doesn't work on me because I'm aware of it. But fuck, it still works on everybody. Like, advertising works on everybody. You see all your friends with the same shit, wearing the same shit. That's why we wear these clothes we wear. We're not wearing, clothes 100 years ago or whatever. Like,
you stick out so hard.
You would. It's embarrassing. So you have to keep up with it. That is our culture, is keeping up with the fucking Joneses. It just causes misery, because even if they look like they're having a better time, they might be going through divorce, which most people do, or whatever, and then all the financial gain that they have just seems worthless when you're suffering like that on the inside,
Yeah, that's the thing it doesn't fix. It's like, money is supposed to be a tool used by a conscious individual in living out their own, fulfilling their destiny, or whatever you want to say. Instead, it's like how you said earlier, again, needing that certain number in the bank to feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. Although, if your aim is also just to feel warm and fuzzy on the inside, then I think you're stuck in like age 6 or something. That's too fleeting of a thing to base one's existence on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's another thing I've said for a long time, too, is that everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy, but that means someone's got to be the garbage man.
Yeah.
Not everybody can be happy all the fucking time. So you're living in some sort of, like, oh, what's your ideal world or whatever? What everyone's, like, smiling all the time. Like, what? You can't be smiling all the time. Like, seems like everyone's on crazy pills or something like that. Like, that'd be awful. And sometimes you're around people that are even so happy it makes you want them to be more miserable.
It's almost like it shames your misery.
Like, get back down to reality for a second, alright? Because that is not normal to want to be happy like that.
Can you imagine being like in the middle of a Soviet Union work camp because you were part of the wrong family or something at one point, and they put you in a work camp? And you're just slaving away and dying and everything, and this one person's just like, woo!
Yeah, exactly.
You'd be like, what in the fuck? Yeah. People are so limiting to themselves.
No one's gonna get my day down.
Guys, you just gotta keep a positive attitude.
It's my birthday today. Positive attitude, that'll help us.
And plus, it's gonna agitate everyone that you're spending time with. And people forget that, like, you don't just live your own life by yourself. You live part of living your life involves that you're surrounded by other people all the time. And if those other people don't like you or don't want you around, you're gonna have a shittier life. And so there's this like degree to which everyone needs to kind of be playing the same game. You can't be too far outside the box, or else you don't get to play the game. And it's like the game's worth playing, I think, because I don't know, there's rules to it, but it's not just absolute limitless, boundaryless freedom.
Yeah.
It's got like a structure to it, and but it seems worth it. Like, the structure allows you to have more mobility within the culture. There's so many different things you could potentially wind up doing to make money or to survive. I'd like to think that most individuals would be able to find some meaningful and fulfilling way of living.
Yeah.
In this culture, obviously assuming that a number of other things are going for them. Having access to education and all that kind of stuff. But where was I going with this? I wonder. Yeah, good question. I guess just to bring it back to money, is that again, it should be a tool of that conscious individual, and living that conscious lived experience, which means kind of figuring out where it is that you fit into the world, because there's only so much that other people can tell you to do. At the end of the day, you're the only one who can know what would be right for you, and that requires a lot of trial and error and running into brick walls face first, but
eventually... It's amazing that anything gets done in this fucking crazy world.
Yeah.
People just seems like people just stumble on the jobs, or they're pressured into the jobs. I think about, like, when I was in high school looking at jobs, people would say these are the good jobs because they were attached to a big number.
Yeah.
These are the good jobs. Well, what? Maybe I wouldn't like doing any of those jobs. Like, why aren't you looking at me and saying what I would be best at? And I feel like most people do that. They think they have a shitty job. Maybe they fucking enjoy their job. Maybe they like the people they work with, but because they don't make a lot of money, they think it's a shitty job. Or vice versa. Maybe they make tons of money.
Yeah.
They work with shitty people. It's a fucking awful job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It comes down to the person being lost in themselves and not knowing how they fit into society. Even though, like I said, everything's working right now, people are fitting in, even though there seems to be like this strong dissonance happening with a lot of people.
There's this idea that I'm feeling like Peterson's work is starting to really kind of fall in well, if I understand what he's saying. It's like that. So you have the idea of moral relativism, which is that any old way is just as valid as any other old way.
Yeah.
Any idea, any religion, any worldview, any fucking anything goes.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that there is no difference in utility or value between ways of looking at the world, which is self-evidently incorrect, because if you do certain things that are quote-unquote bad, bad things tend to come about as a result, and things get worse, and the world gets worse, and the community gets worse, and the family gets worse, and the house gets worse, and the person gets worse. Or if you do good things, if you behave in a proper way, then more good things will start to happen, and the person gets better, and the house gets better, and the family's better, and the neighborhood's better. It literally spirals out from the individual, but it requires the individual taking that upon themselves to become who they really are, instead of staying their shitty old pathetic self, right?
Yeah.
So you need to... So, like, the hierarchy of values he puts forward, because he argues against the idea of moral relativism, that there is, like, a difference in value between, say, capitalism and communism. And that there's this, like, a hierarchy, like a pyramid of values, and some values need to be subordinate to other values. Like, do you put money at the top of the pyramid, or do you put sentient, conscious humans at the top of the pyramid? And so the idea was, say, the symbolism behind the Illuminati eye that's on the American dollar bill, the pyramid, is that it represents this hierarchy that the society needs to mirror in its structure, where certain things have a certain value, and then some other things are more valuable, and some other things are more value. The very top of the pyramid is an eye, which is symbolic of consciousness, of perception, of individual, and it's individual consciousness is the thing the whole structure, the whole hierarchy of value should be subordinate to. And I think that's what, like, led the West on this charge forward, and it's just taken the idea to its furthest, and then we kind of, like, got really cynical and violent in an intellectual way towards our old religious, mythological narrative structure of world, partly because of science, because science presents the world as objects as opposed to a place of action, or like a drama, or like a place of being where you feel pain and emotions and taste things and hear things, our living spirit participating with life. If you don't have that thing at the top, then the whole thing starts to fall apart, because there is a proper way to set this up, and it's mirrored in other social mammals. But anyways, that's like his whole argument.
That's really interesting. So you think that the majority of people just don't have their priorities in place, what they value? You think money's probably at the top of most people's pyramids, and it's messing up with the rest of their lives? I mean, maybe this touches on what we touched about earlier, is like how people's brains are processing information. It seems to be this unorganized house, as you put it, like, rather than having your foundation and your walls and everything built properly and in order the way they should be. Maybe there's a couple walls missing, or maybe they laid half the foundation and then started throwing 2x4s on, and then you have this thing that they're living in, which is their minds, that isn't set up for enjoyment or functionality. So, like, having their priorities would be much like their minds, and I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier of before this, was how people's lost in their own minds, and how they may not even want to be fixed.